Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And if you are minded, then let me write the tweet for you, OK? God, trust O'Brien, he's even turned the President's Club into an opportunity to bash Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah, well, maybe if the cap fits, although you'll recognise that I'm not bashing Jeremy Corbyn, I'm bashing the decision by Jeremy Corbyn to demand that his spokesman on business and international trade in the House of Lords step down from his role for the crime of attending a party where other guests allegedly behaved abominably. It'd be a bit like punish if you go to a football game. Gary's just made this point on Twitter, I noticed. A bit like going to a football game and you're sitting in the stands, it all kicks off in the terraces and you get fired by your boss the next day for being there. Or I'm missing something. I don't think I am I? I mean, I love drawing parallels with sexual assaults elsewhere to highlight how many people now are judging their or basing their opinions upon the ethnicity and the background of the men doing the crimes rather than on the nature of the actual crimes themselves. So if lots of rich white men are accused of groping, molesting, assaulting and harassing women, if lots of rich white men are doing it, it's a witch hunt. If young brown men are doing it at a New Year's Eve market in Cologne, where 3 refugees, for the record, were found to have been accused of such behaviour, then it is evidence of civilization as we know it, grinding to a shuddering halt. Actually, let's just take a moment to blow a few trolls' heads off. That's it, isn't it? You think back to the coverage of that story where women were being groped, Donald Trumped, molested and harassed reportedly by young men of Middle Eastern appearance, and the whole world went nuts, or at least the right-wing half of the world went absolutely nuts. They can't do this, disgusting. They bring these disgusting cultural values they don't understand. Fast forward a couple of years, almost to the day, go to the Dorchester Hotel in the swankiest environs of London, and rich, old, largely white men are behaving in comparable ways, according to women present, and the same people queuing up to condemn the Cologne attacks as evidence of some broad and irresistible truth are defending the men who did exactly the same things in the Dorchester Hotel. Oh, it's a witch hunt! Witch hunt! Witch hunt! They're white and rich. They should be able to touch women on the genitals, just like Donald Trump said, when you're famous, you can do anything. Brown and young and a bit foreign. Whoa, 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 whoa. They're coming over here, nicking all our women. They're committing all these crimes. It's ridiculous. The world's gone mad. That's just fact, guys. Sorry. I appreciate it's going to be an incredibly tough pill for some people to swallow. The more racist you are, the tougher the pill will be. But they're just facts. You should react to these two stories more or less identically. It's not hard. I do. Disgusting behaviour. You don't touch women who don't want to be touched, ever. You don't grab them by the proverbials. You do not boast about being able to do whatever you want to do to them. You do not touch them on the bottom or put your hand up their skirt or box them into corners and put pressure on them to take their knickers off, get on a table and start dancing. In fact, I could pick the anecdotes. I could pick the reports. I could pick the allegations from both scenarios, all 3 of them. The President of the United States of America boasting about behaving like this, rich white men at the Dorchester being filmed behaving like this, and then poor brown men in Cologne being accused of behaving like this. All, for me, the same. I do not and possibly never will understand why that is a difficult position for people to grasp. Semicolon, pause, inhale. And then we turn our attention to people who were there and didn't do anything wrong. Look, just for fun, okay? I was at an event yesterday run by a charity that I consider to be among the most important on the planet. I was at an event held by the Anne Frank Trust. I heard Lord Alfred Dubs speak about refugees and recall his own experiences as a 6-year-old getting out of Prague as part of kinder transport, and he spoke very movingly about his attempts to display or to encourage this government to display similar compassion to the new generation of refugees coming out of places like Syria. It was quite a poignant moment, you can imagine. But I happened to notice, I didn't see his face, and I'm not going to mention his name, but on the guest list for that event was a man who has also been reported as attending the President's Club dinner. And if you're going to punish people just for being there, then, well, where does it end? Should I be punished for going to for going to an event 3 days later that was attended by someone who'd been at that event? Do you see what I mean? If you're going to go after people who haven't been accused of behaving in the offensive fashion, I just don't see where it's going to end. I'm sort of framing quite odd thoughts towards Jeremy Corbyn at the moment. I was thinking last night that if this was a movie, it would be a bit like Rocky, you know. He has spent 30 years sticking to his guns. You might hate the guns that he's stuck to, but you can't dispute the fact he spent 30 years pursuing a slightly po-faced position on an awful lot of moral issues and a slightly, in my view, idealistic position on an awful lot of political issues and a slightly, in my view, dangerous issue on a lot of Middle Eastern issues, dangerous position on Middle Eastern issues. But he has stuck to his guns. He's been desperately unpopular and rather comical for decades. And now, I think probably more in the Conservative Party than in the Parliamentary Labour Party, there is a profound belief that he could be Prime Minister soon. So that should be like a Hollywood movie, shouldn't it? Sticking to your principles throughout, decades of derision and then finally coming good at the end. But that's a conversation for another day. The conversation we're having today addresses this statement from a Labour Lords spokesman. Jeremy Corbyn has asked Lord Mendelsohn, not Mandelson, don't get them mixed up. Jeremy Corbyn has asked Lord Mendelsohn to step back from the front bench as he attended the President's Club dinner, and he has agreed to do so. Lord Mendelsohn has previously made clear that he attended part of the dinner as president of a charity that received support from the event, and he had no knowledge of an after-party. Lord Mendelsohn did not witness any of the appalling incidents described in reports and has unreservedly condemned such behaviour. Then why the hell has he been sacked? He has been sacked for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nadeem Zahawi, the Conservative politician, has also apologised and said that he left early. He arguably has a few more questions to answer because he seems to have attended it for the last 8 years. And there is a suggestion that men such as these should not attend anything that comes with a men-only invitation, which last time I checked would mean they're not allowed to go to the long room at Lord's on a test match day. That might have changed recently, but I don't think it has. Is this one of those things where everyone can agree? We had amazing calls yesterday, and it occurred to me after the programme that we're talking about turning around an oil tanker. It's why I will get very cross with people who can't see that they're condemning behaviour done by young brown men and defending it when it's done by old white men. That's very different from the oil tanker I'm about to describe. That is just, sadly, evidence of judging people according to their skin colour rather than their conduct. And there's a word for that, begins with R. But for the rest of us, and I was the oil tanker yesterday, one caller in particular sort of led me towards the idea that we should treat men and women identically in these sort of circumstances, which I'm not going to lie to you, I still can't quite see or accept, although Sam took me to school for a good 10 minutes during yesterday's programme. But I get that. It's really hard. We spoke, a couple of men who rang in yesterday, we addressed the issue of what you should do if someone else is behaving like that, didn't we? We spoke to a fella who turned it down and kind of got a bit of jip from his colleagues because he said, well, if you're not going, then none of us can go either because you've kind of highlighted the fact that it's sleazy and everybody else pretends that it isn't or pretends that they don't know. What do you do if you witness a colleague behaving in this fashion? You would love to think you'd do the right thing. You would love to think that you'd say, mate, sort yourself out. Do that again and I'm phoning your wife. Or whatever tactic you might employ. But quite how you are somehow culpable or worthy of discipline, disciplinary action. This fella's been demoted from the front bench in the House of Lords for being at a party where other people behaved abominably. I can't quite get my head around the idea that anybody, let alone the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, would think that that was acceptable behaviour. But, as I discovered yesterday, we've all got our own oil tankers and we're all finding it rather hard to turn them around. So you tell me why you think he should have gone. 0345 60 60973. Quite a few people suggesting that the the whiff of anti-Semitism that hangs over the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn might have played a part in this. I will acknowledge that suggestion, the idea that because Lord Mendelsohn is a prominent Jewish Labour politician, Jeremy Corbyn might have held the rule against him in a slightly different way from how he would have done with a non-Jewish politician. I don't believe that, but I think until Jeremy Corbyn makes more meaningful efforts to address these perceptions and examples of anti-Semitism, he has to deal with that suspicion. That's the price you pay for not moving fast enough and hard enough against people in constituency Labour parties who routinely talk about Jewish people, and I still draw distinctions between that and Israel itself, in the most foul of terms. I don't think this has anything to do with the decision to get rid of Lord Mendelsohn. I really don't. That's just my personal opinion, for the record, but I'm not going to brush over the views of people who do think it would have played a part. Neither, I suppose, am I going to brush over the views of people who, like me, can't quite believe we're living in a country where you can be fired from a job in politics for being at a party where other people misbehaved. Can you? Should we open the phone lines? Maybe turn my voice down an octave. I'll go a little deep. I'll go Barry White for the second quarter of the programme. The number you need, and if you hit these numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. It doesn't often happen this way round, but I suppose if you feel that I'm being reactionary and something of an apologist for sex offenders, or in some way underestimating the gravity of these alleged offences, then you will go to the front of the queue. If you think Corbyn, can you park your Corbynitis on this one? If you're a full-on supporter of Jez, can you park that and say he's got this wrong? Because you know my fear that the hardcore Corbyn lobby is a little bit Brexity, in that they'll never admit that anything possibly is wrong with their side of the argument. I've encountered that a lot with Jeremy Corbyn supporters, but I hesitate to generalise quite so violently. If you're a massive fan of Jeremy Corbyn but you think he's got this wrong, then again you'll go to second place in the queue. And if you have a powerful explanation for me as to why you should fire people from political roles, I don't think anyone necessarily should be fired from a commercial role, but you should fire people from political roles if they find themselves at events that go feral. Otherwise, we could all end up being punished for the crimes of other people, couldn't we? You know? I don't get it. I go to the LBC Christmas party and Steve Allen starts misbehaving. Should I be punished? I just don't really think so. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm not. In the FT today, the Financial Times, of course, highlighted, blew the lid off the President's Club, where young women were reportedly molested on an industrial scale by wealthy white men, but not by all the wealthy white men that were there. Not all the men there were white. They were all pretty wealthy, either by association or by themselves, because 1,600 quid for a dinner ticket it's nuts. But here's one of the letters that the Financial Times printed, because I think it's important to remind ourselves what proper journalism looks like. They will print criticism and negativity of their own journalism. The sort of polar opposite, if you will, of the Trumpian fake news paradigm. Sir, it saddens me that a highly respectable newspaper like the Financial Times should lower itself to the level of the gutter press. To send two attractive reporters along to an all-male party with the objective of creating news headlines is simply not acceptable for a newspaper of your standing. You may have achieved a little cheap publicity, but an organisation that has raised more than £20 million for very worthy charitable causes has now been destroyed as a result of your efforts. A quiet word with the organisers pointing out any problems would have achieved the desired effect of raising standards without totally destroying the organisation. Frankly, your paper should be ashamed of itself. A chap called Robert McLachlan published in the Financial Times today, suggesting that the people who've blown the lid off sexual harassment on an industrial scale should be ashamed of themselves, and not actually, I don't know whether the letter was edited, I very much doubt it, not mentioning the word shame at all in the context of the conduct reported. Just an illustration of how nuanced this whole story is from some people's perspectives. And speaking of some people's perspectives, no ingratitude intended at all to Ed or Jason or Tony or Adrian or James or even Bradley. But no women have rung me yet, which says it all to me. Absolutely says it all. What do you think about this story involving men oppressing or abusing women? Give me a ring and tell me what you think. Oh, well, I'm a woman. It's not really for me. I'm a man. Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what's going on. And this is pot kettle territory, obviously. Yeah, men, a very strong opinion on exactly what should happen in the context of how women are treated. So we'll talk more about how men are treated. And in this case, Lord Mendelsohn, Jeremy Corbyn's decision to sack him simply for being there. Simple question, is that fair? Ed's in Plymouth. Ed, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. I think it is fair because I think that.
Okay, go on.
Well, first of all, it is Jeremy Corbyn's decision, and I think I'd make the first point. You did touch on the fact of the anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and there's been the criticism that Corbyn hasn't done enough to address it.
Yes.
So now he is saying, well, there's a potential issue here, so I'm going to head it off. And
but the potential issue here has nothing to do with anti-Semitism.
Well, I would.
The suggestion is that he's come down hard on this character because this character is a prominent sort of Jewish Friends of Labour supporter and that kind of thing. So I don't know that this insulates Corbyn from suspicions of anti-Semitism in the party.
Well, no, I wasn't saying it was specifically anti-Semitism. I was saying that is an example. People have said he's not stood up to bullying within the party.
Right.
Now I'm making the argument that you can say he is. The other thing I'd say is...
I'm going to argue with you, Ed. Forgive me, because essentially what you're suggesting with this argument is that if there is bullying in the Labour Party, then Jeremy Corbyn should have sacked a lot of people who were there but didn't do any bullying at the time.
Well, should he have sacked people who were there and knew people were bullying? Because I'm not particularly impressed by the idea that that Mendelsohn had absolutely no idea what was going on at the party.
Why not?
Well, because... it's an all-male party.
Yeah.
It's all skimpy girls in dresses. It just seems to me it's one of those things that surely people knew what was going on, even if there was...
But now what you've done now, forgive me, because I don't know that I'm being a little overly robust, but if you get up first on a day like today, that's the price you pay, Ed. Because you just segued ever so slightly into they knew what they were letting themselves in for territory, which I know wasn't your intention. But the logic you've just employed to describe why Lord Mendelsohn should be fired is the same logic that people less pleasant than you employ to explain why the women who were there shouldn't really complain, because they must have known what they were letting themselves in for.
Well, no, I think having worked as a temp, I know that if you get told, right, here's a job, you're going to be serving drinks, ... go along, do it. Half the time you've no idea where you're going. You might not find out until the day before that it's at the Dorchester Hotel. You might not even know who it's there. You just arrive.
Not true in this case. In this case, there were 5-page documents that were signed and fairly detailed instructions on how they would have to conduct themselves on the night. So I'll allow you to say I didn't mean to move into the camp of people saying these women knew what they were letting themselves in for, but I won't allow you to pretend that you didn't.
Okay, so my question is, was there a main party and an after party then?
Yes.
Because when I looked at it this morning, I didn't realise that I hadn't heard the suggestions of the two parties. I assumed that
the after party
maybe
was
not one whole, maybe
much
it wasn't
worse.
forced through right from the start. But my understanding was that it had been one party, and then as things progressed, as the drink started to flow, it got a lot worse.
Yes, that's correct. The after party was where the worst behaviour was reported. And neither Mr. Zahawi nor Lord Mendelsohn attended the after party. Just give me in a nutshell why you think he should be fired for being there.
So I am starting to come... All right, I'll be honest, I'm starting to come around to the idea that maybe he shouldn't have been there. But at the same time, it's really... you have to admit, it's really not a good look, is it?
I'm not saying he should be flipping rewarded or given a medal for being there. And I wouldn't personally have gone, because I find the whole notion of a men-only event to be... just a bit gross, a bit sad, a little bit kind of back of the... Do you know what I mean? Just a little bit... Yeah, sad is the word that I'd use in the context and connotations that it had when I was a schoolboy. It's just a bit sad, but it's not bad.
Yes, but it does speak to a completely different culture, though, and it's this idea... as you say, you wouldn't go to a men-only event for that reason. Now... I'm sorry, I really do not buy into the fact that Mendelsohn and Zahawi had absolutely no idea what was going on at this event.
Even if they did have an idea what was going on, what should they have done?
Well, it goes to what you were saying earlier about your caller yesterday. I heard you say I heard your caller who was working in the construction industry who said
right, yeah.
when he had this party offered, quite clearly that he would have.
Yeah, no,
you don't have to cheat on your wife. That's fine, but be one of the lads and take part.
And he refused. But there's no evidence that either of these politicians were being asked to be one of the lads and take part. It's a business. I mean, let's not forget the status attached to this, which is huge. These are some of the most wealthy and powerful men in the country. You could argue that for the Labour Party's spokesman in the House of Lords on business and international trade not to attend events like this would be dereliction of duty. I don't think you approve of this sacking. You're just finding it hard to conceive of Jeremy Corbyn as having done something daft.
Well, I don't know if you remember me having called into you before to defend Corbyn. I don't know if that.
No, I don't remember that. I'm doing it more. It was a speculative thrust, Ed. Nothing personal intended. A speculative parry. 10:28 is the time. Let's go to Sekena, who is in Watford. Sekena, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the question is really whether these events that were organised by the President's Club, whether they were known to have a certain reputation. And I think the fact that they were generally for a certain elite, so white, very wealthy, old men, requesting or expecting women to be dressed in a certain way and to be served and hosted in a certain way. And if these events have a certain reputation, then I think it would be fair to say that for a minister on a front bench to attend such an event, even though he may not have partook in what was going on or did not see what was going on, but there is a question. If these events have a certain reputation, ministers should not attend those events.
Then you could have guidelines in place before the event. You can't do it, but then you must have guidelines in place before the event. I don't think you can do it retrospectively.
Well, I think the thing is that now, particularly in the past year with the whole Weinstein affair, there has been a greater awareness that particularly among elite and those men that are in power, there is now a bigger responsibility that men in power have
I accept that.
to ensure that it's not about attending it and taking part in it or not necessarily saying I didn't see what was going on, but to attend events where women are essentially expected to dress in a certain way. Because yesterday I was listening to Ian Dale and a woman called in and she was saying that as an agency worker for many years she was hosting at these events and she would be expected to wear a dress of a certain length, a cut of a certain length, heels of a certain height, showing her figure in a certain way. So there is a certain expectation that goes along with these events. And I believe that if we are going to move forward in a way that women should not be expected in this day and age to dress in a certain way just to appease men, then I think it's very, very important that leaders of political parties send out messages that they will not accept their party members being present at such events, even if they do not partake.
You make a powerful argument. Very briefly, I'm late for the news, so very briefly, would this extend to other spheres? Do you think? I mean, if I'd been there, do you think that my position would be weakened?
I think the main issue here is that he is a front bench minister
in the Lords.
I think anyone in that position, you as a journalist, you as Joe Bloggs just attending, that's different. But as a front bench minister, you have to hold yourself to much higher standards.
So then you would expect, or rather you would want Theresa May to get rid of Nadeem Zahawi as well.
I absolutely believe so. I mean, he has been going there for the past 8 years. I think it's incredible that he had no idea what was going on. I think the issue is, why didn't he speak out about it or say that actually these...
I hear you. I'm going to enjoy this hour. We're only halfway through it. We may continue it for longer. 2 out of 2 so far saying Corbyn got it right. I'm convinced he got it wrong, but I would probably concede that some of the arguments we heard, particularly from Sekena, no offence to Ed, pretty powerful. A quick word of thanks to my producer Beth Woodbridge for her help this week in getting the angles and the questions exactly right on these stories that could in the wrong hands, lend themselves to really lazy questions like, give me a ring if you tell me you think these women were asking for it. Give me a ring if you think these men are just boys being boys. No, get the question bang on, and you get fantastic contributions, not just on the phones, of course, but on the screen as well. This from Emma. You asked yesterday, what can men do to help change the culture of sexual predation? I did, yes. Her answer is, you clearly and unequivocally support those without power and use your own to demonstrate with actions that the culture is unacceptable. That is the clear statement from Labour today. Yeah, you're right. And if I say, well, they could have made that statement without sacking him, you'd come straight back to me and say that would be words, not actions. But then Julie takes a different position. There's a great irony in Corbyn, who's so often accused of sharing dubious platforms and refusing to say certain words when asked to condemn bigotry, racism, etc., now requesting the resignation of a minister because of perceived association. And she adds, weird times. We can't speculate about whether there are more details due to come out. A lot of you are doing that. I don't think that will prove to be part of this story, but I have no way of proving or disproving that. The statement that sticks in my mind is this, from the spokesman for the Labour Party in the House of Lords. Lord Mendelsohn did not witness any of the appalling incidents described in reports and has unreservedly condemned such behaviour. So what do you think he's been sacked for? 0345 606 0973. Didn't even witness this conduct, let alone commit it, perpetrate it, do it. Didn't even witness it. Gets fired. Yeah, 2 callers, slight majority of the tweets. The tweets are breaking down, really, between people dealing with this sensibly and people nursing themselves really in the corner over that comparison with Cologne. All these people whose heads exploded, still struggling, which is quite nice to watch. Holly's in Harlesden. Holly, what would you like to say?
Hi, morning. I think it's a crazy decision for him to lose his job over attending this obviously questionable, well, I don't know if it is questionable, it is so nuanced, as you say, but I think that just kind of almost discredits the whole brilliant movement that's happening now, where people are questioning their kind of attitudes and the way that women are treated, and equality for both, for all genders, really. I think it's sort of, it smacks of something else to me, and I don't know if that is anti-Semitism.
Look, I've put that balloon in the air, but I just want to leave it in the air. If you want to come up with a cynical analysis, I'd recommend this one. They're putting pressure on Nadeem Zahawi. They're putting pressure on Theresa May to get rid of another minister. She's already broken all the records for ministerial departures and movements. And I mean, Lord Mendelsohn, I had heard of him. If you'd asked me to name what his job was in the House of Lords, I wouldn't have been able to. So I think this is more of Corbyn doing the kind of politics that we were told he'd never do. This is a little bit of manoeuvring and a little bit of leverage and a little bit of politicking, possibly. A lot more than the anti-Semitism, I hope.
Yeah, and I met someone yesterday who's been to this event, and I asked him quite openly, what was his impression. He didn't go this week, luckily he didn't go.
Yes.
He said, there's so much money raised, and they're not aware that instructions go out to the hostess.
The average guest, won't be aware of that, and the average guest won't be asking them to take their knickers off and start dancing on the table. So
100%, and that was his take on it, and the charitable aspect of people, the hospitals giving back, £500,000 and everything, and this, huge donations. I don't think it's right to have men only.
There is. I need to just point out, because quite a few people are making this point, and although I understand that they're not all making it in a cynical fashion, you can give a hell of a lot of money to Great Ormond Street or any charity you want without being involved in the molestation of young women.
Of course you can, but it isn't like that. If you've been to any fundraiser, you know that part of the way that charities...
I've been to loads, and you're going to push... If you push me any further, I'm going to go peak holier than thou on this one. Because I won't go to things that involve a reward. I'll write a cheque or I'll give my time to charities, but I won't expect anything in return. I'm not going to pay 500 quid to go somewhere where they've spent 300 of that on my dinner.
No, that's fair enough. But
that's just me.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I take that. But I also know they use the egos of these super rich people to kind of outbid themselves on lots.
That's true.
And lots of charities do that. And that is just a kind of human nature thing of outbidding. That's an auction. That's how they.
Yeah, no, I get all of that. So, Emma, who is one of my favourite correspondents, put it pretty powerfully. That it's all very well making the noises and saying the words, but this actually puts actions in place, actions that answer the question of how you challenge this culture of sexual predation. And obviously you're never going to be able to challenge it in the context of New Year's Eve markets in Cologne if you're giving it a free pass in a room full of plutocrats at the Dorchester.
Well, that's, as we're led to believe, groping, misconduct, awful, sexual violence, that's what it is,
yes,
against women who are employed and had to sign NDA agreements, which is also, if that is true, completely unacceptable. So I really want to make clear that I feel like that, but I don't think...
But don't sack a bloke just for being there.
I think that actually does the whole movement no favour at all. It makes people say witch hunt, and I think... that's the worst phrase for any, it's just
well, yeah, except that the only people who use the phrase witch hunt will be the kind of people who claimed that the Cologne attacks were the end of civilization as we know it, and can't compute somehow the idea that the behaviour is actually identical, because no, they were brown and poor and they're rich and white, so it can't be the same at all. And then we're back to the Donald Trump tape. Kirsty is in Sherborne. Thank you, Holly. I don't know what I think anymore. I think the callers have been better than me, actually, today. I don't say that very often at explaining their position, but I can't move from my position. Let's see if Kirsty can help. Kirsty, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm an avid listener, but first-time caller, so bear with me.
We're better late than never, Kirsty.
Yes, exactly. There was a conversation on LBC the other day, I believe yesterday, about people that were jailed because they were witnesses or friends and associates of those committing quite violent crimes. And I think that could carry
Joint
over
enterprise.
into this situation. Yes, joint enterprise, exactly. And I think that can carry over into this. I think it's very difficult to believe that those attending this party were unaware of the nature and the underlying tone of the parties. And I think...
No, there's a massive difference. If somebody came forward and said, I was assaulted and Lord Mendelsohn was watching, then your parallel would work. But if somebody comes forward and says, I was assaulted and Lord Mendelsohn was on the other side of the room at the same party, then joint enterprise doesn't really apply, I don't think.
Well, I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think it's because, as the previous caller just mentioned, they had to sign NDA forms.
But you wouldn't have known that as a guest, Kirsty, would you?
Yeah, understandable. But I don't know. I do think that there may have been a tone, maybe jokes that are being made, things that are being said from previous parties. I find it hard to believe that they had no idea that I don't think this would have been the first time this happened at a party like this. No. And I find it hard to believe that they had no inclination of what was going on, whether they were direct witnesses of it, or whether they were just aware. And I think by being there, you're endorsing that nature of a party.
That environment. I know, that culture. But when he says, exactly. I mean, it must be it's the first time I can remember a sacking statement containing the phrase, he didn't witness any of the appalling incidents described in reports and has unreservedly condemned such behaviour, but we're going to fire him anyway.
Yeah, I understand that point, but I just think, personally, if I hold a position that is respected and that influences, I would be questioning where I attend and where I do attend.
Well, of course, and henceforth he would have done that, just as I can't imagine Nadeem Zahawi would turn up next year if the gig was still on. But to sack them for being there, because you're calling them liars, and you're saying you did witness appalling incidents, even though I can't prove it and you deny it, which is a scary road to go down, or you're calling them complicit, which is where your joint enterprise analogy comes in, but that would surely involve being able to prove that they knew it was happening, and if you can't do that, you can't punish them.
Well, or they had heard rumours and they chose to not believe them, or they chose to turn somewhat of a blind eye, which I guess you could argue is calling them liars, but I do struggle to believe that they had no idea.
All right. Well, this is why we really need to speak to more people who were actually there, about how possible it was to be there and not witness this stuff. But of course, then you've got the Mandy Rice Davis problem. Someone will ring up, tell us they were there, tell us they didn't see anything, so it's perfectly wrong to sack Lord Mendelsohn, and you'll go, well, of course you would say that. You're not going to say, I was there, I saw loads of gross stuff going on and I didn't do anything. 10:47 is the time. Gracie writes, Mr. Corbyn's hat is off I think you mean gloves, don't you? Corbyn acted strong and decisively, in direct contrast to how May has behaved with a cabinet full of sex pests, which she did nothing about. You criticised him for acting too slowly over Jared O'Mara. I don't think I did, actually, guys. I didn't have a great deal to say about the Jared O'Mara story. And now I might have been on holiday when it happened. But now you attack him for acting quickly over Mendelsohn. But you make my point for me without realising it. Jared O'Mara had a hat full of evidence of his misdemeanours online, his social media toxicity. Nobody has got anything on Mendelsohn except being there, while other people reportedly did bad things. No, I'm back to my belief. This is a big mistake, and if Theresa May gets rid of Nadine Zahawi as well, Minister for Children and Families, does that put a different spin on it compared to business and industry? It's 10:48. A little Brexit bulletin for you. The Leader of the House, Andrea Leadsom, has dismissed the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney's claim that Brexit uncertainty is already costing us 200 million quid a week. Meanwhile, the man who was baffled by badgers, Owen Paterson, has dismissed the Confederation of British Industries position on what Brexit will mean for British industry. So, you know, if you're still swimming in that direction, you are now called upon to take Andrea Leadsom's analysis of the international economic and domestic situation as being superior to that of Mark Carney. And you are asked to, when contemplating matters commercial, to take Owen Paterson's opinion as superior to that of the Confederation of British Industry. I will not stop pointing this out until you realise how stupid you're being. It's 10:53. Back to the question of whether Jeremy Corbyn has been clever or silly, or neither, or both, in his demand that Lord Mendelsohn step down from the Labour's front bench in the House of Lords for, I'm going to get this exactly right, for the offence of attending a party where other guests did bad things. Things that he has unreservedly condemned and which he did not witness. Surely, if you put it like that, you're going to struggle to think that he should have gone. But it would appear that I'm in a minority among the people responding today. Kev's in Nazing in Essex. Kev, what would you like to say, Kev?
Good morning, James. I'm finding all this quite farcical, really, because I think people are not getting the facts regarding these events. And not only do I perform at these events, I actually supply entertainers for these events and artists, and I see it on a regular basis. And we're not just talking all men events. We're talking.
No, we are
today.
As well. We are today talking all men events because that puts a very different complexion on things. If women had been present and this behaviour had occurred, for me it would have been a different environment, possibly a different moral environment. So let's leave those ones at the door and focus entirely on events to which no women are invited.
Well, okay, let's leave it at that. When I've been to these events, obviously with...
Mate, I've got a problem here, because what do I have to say to you now? Do I have to say, have you witnessed women being assaulted and done nothing?
I've seen no women in any of the events that I've been to, all gentlemen events, that have ever been assaulted.
Right, then you can't keep saying these events, can you? You can't compare events where it hasn't happened to events where it has happened.
But what I'm trying to say to you is that the events that I've been to, it's actually not the gentlemen that have been assaulting the women, but actually vice versa.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. See,
Lord,
for me,
that's even dafter than what I thought you were trying to say. So let's be clear. We're talking about some sourced journalism in one of the country's most reputable newspapers describing serial molestation of women and harassment of women by men who'd paid £1,600 to attend a dinner. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I don't want to hear your thoughts about some mythical party you went to where the women were all abusing the men. I want to hear your thoughts.
No, I didn't say they were.
I want to hear your thoughts on this issue and the question of whether or not Jeremy Corbyn should have sacked someone just for being there, despite his claim. Right.
No,
well, that was fun. Ian's in Stratford. Ian, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
Nadine Zahawi is my constituency MP. And
Stratford on Avon he is, isn't he?
Yeah. He's an awful MP, mate. He's done the expensive scandal.
Well, steady on, mate. I haven't got my lawyers here. Most MPs were caught up in the expenses scandal, so I don't think you've landed any punches necessarily with that one, and you're perfectly entitled not to like him. Should he have been sacked just for being at this party?
No. And the reason for why, James, is because he hasn't broken any laws. And if you want to do that, you can extend that moral argument to anybody that ever goes to a lap dancing club with things gone out. Now, if he
No, you can't. You can't. God, I'm arguing with everyone today. It must be Friday.
Sorry.
You can't compare it to a lap dancing club because everybody knows the score at a lap dancing club.
Yeah, but I suspect that if he attended this event previously, he probably knew what went on.
Yeah, but you can't have him on a probably and an if.
So what,
you can only have him on an actually and an is.
So he attended it.
Yeah.
And according to what he's put in the media, James, saw what went on.
You didn't see it. No, Zahawi.
Sorry.
Yeah, you might be right. Maybe you... see, I'm about to start talking about Mendelsohn and you're talking about Zahawi. He did claim that he left early, but I don't know if he said he saw what went on and left. I think he tried to say he left before anything happened, but Nick had a guest on earlier and the numbers didn't quite add up, did they? The timings didn't quite add up.
He said he left it, etc. But I think for him to lose his job would be incorrect.
Yeah, I do. His decision to attend had been unacceptable. That's what Maria Miller has said, the chairwoman of the Women and Equality Select Committee, and of course a Conservative colleague of Zahawi's. Maybe we're just old and rusty, mate. Maybe
I don't think so.
Well, of course we're not going to think so, are we? Because we're old and rusty. We're too old and rusty to realise that we're old and rusty.
I think it's the opposite, James. I think you're kind of in this world whereby we're thinking what we think today. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, where these were probably more commonplace, probably didn't hit the media. I think at that stage, I think we would have probably been a little bit more outraged. I think people are just moving on. I'd like to believe that, James, that people are moving on to a point now where they're thinking, you know, if that's how you get off, if that's what makes you happy, even if 1,600 quid, a little bit of money goes out the back door to a charity as a means of justification, I think people are just wising up to it now, as they are on things like MP's expenses. This particular MP, you know, he once again, I'm not going to threaten your lawyers here, James. So he started off the YouGov organisation, multi-millionaire. And he was charging the taxpayer for heating his stables at home, you know, which is, you know...
This is true, but I mean, do you know, the last time I actually got asked, this will surprise people kind enough to listen on a regular basis, the last time I got asked privately by back channels to lay off a politician on the programme was during the expenses scandal, and it was Labour politicians I was asked to lay off. And I remember it well. He was caught claiming money for heating his stables, which is not a good look, is it? Even if you love horses. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. Ian, thank you. I want to carry on with this. I can't believe it's 11 o'clock already. This has happened. This is blinking dry January. My brain cells are going too quickly. Everything's flying past. I want more people telling me why they think he shouldn't have been sacked. Without trying to claim, as one poor fella did a few minutes ago, that actually the real story here is all the men that get... I can't believe that anybody in the 21st century can hear a story about women being groped by rich and powerful men and respond by saying, yeah, well, men get groped too. It's quite incredible. I want to stay with this. The producer doesn't. So it's up to you whether or not we take a few more calls on the question of whether Jeremy Corbyn is right to sack Lord Mendelsohn for the crime of attending a party where bad behaviour reportedly occurred. This is what's it called? Is it a straw man when you make a... I've never quite got my hand of all this new language. Snowflake, safe place, straw man, all of this sort of thing. It seems to me often to be shouted the loudest by people who fit the criteria for the description better than the people they're shouting at. But this is a bit of a confected position, if you like. In 2015, there were 3 sex crimes reported at Glastonbury. In 2014, there were 2 sex crimes. There was a case last year where the accused was cleared but had been accused of rape. And yet Jeremy Corbyn went to Glastonbury. So no one would claim that Jeremy Corbyn should have withdrawn himself from Glastonbury because it had been the site of sex crimes in the past, actual recorded sex crimes as opposed to alleged. So, look, it feels in my brain like this is a reach too far. This, if you pardon the pun, is me groping in the dark for something. But it is the same principle. It's guilt by association. Jeremy Corbyn has concluded that Lord Mendelsohn is guilty of something, of a sackable offence by dint of his association with people who've done disgusting things that he neither witnessed nor condoned. So his crime, his guilt, is established simply by his presence. Jeremy Corbyn went to Glastonbury after it had been the seat of several sex crimes. It's not quite the same. But you perhaps begin to see why Corbyn's conduct puzzles me. unless it's leverage on Zahawi, who has, let's get this absolutely right, his reasons for leaving early. I don't know. Are the vultures circling for Zahawi, and is it simply an attempt to speed up the circling that explains Corbyn's conduct? And we will move on this hour shortly, I suspect, to some astonishing research showing that 7 in 10 workers are chronically broke. Only 30% of us say they live comfortably. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not in the 30%. That would be stupid and incredibly patronising and insulting to you. But you know me, I've never been one to deny poverty or to question the parameters of what defines poverty. But I do think increasingly, while working hard to keep an eye on the people at the very bottom of the pile, we have to start acknowledging that people who are more than halfway up the pile are struggling in a way that they probably a little bit embarrassed to acknowledge. So we'll get stuck into that shortly as well. Corbyn sacked Lord Mendelsohn, rightly or wrongly. Francine is in Leeds. Francine, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'd like to say this. I started a children's charity in 1993, and ever since then have run an annual dinner for gentlemen. We have girls on the evening, probably between 15 and 20, who help us with the fundraising and running around and making sure everybody's fine.
Why is it gentlemen only? Why is it gentlemen only?
Well, that's how it started off.
Right.
A bit sexist. Don't know. It was just an idea at the time.
But well, you had the idea. Well, where did it come from?
From my head.
Yeah, so when it came into your head, you thought, we'll do that because...
Because gentlemen generally, and I know it's a bit sexist for ladies to say this, hold the purse strings. So if you want to get money for a charity, you go to the people who've got the money, or you think they've got the money.
I got that backwards. Seriously.
That's why you weren't invited, James.
You're absolutely right. No, hang on. I need to get this clear. To be absolutely clear, your rationale for doing this is that if the wives aren't there, they'll give more money.
I think so.
All right, I can live with that. I don't know if I agree, but I can live with it.
Okay. So you have between sort of 15 and 20 girls on the evening, and you do a briefing before the evening starts. And to be honest with you, had anything untoward gone along on my evenings, I would have expected those girls to either come to me and complain, or never to join us again on the following year. And we do have girls that come year after year because it's such a fun evening.
Yeah, fine.
And they've got to be in the spirit of the evening. And if a guy, if he just puts a hand round a shoulder, it's not exactly somebody attacking you, is it?
No, but it's wrong. And we're going to part company on this one. And I am an oil tanker trying to turn around. Even as recently as 6 months ago, I'd have completely agreed with you about that. But when I ask if there's one woman in the world who feels that is wrong behaviour, it really isn't that hard for men to just stop doing it.
Right. Well, if she felt it was wrong, why can she not complain? Why can she not go up to the organiser?
You've told us why. I mean, she's on £8 an hour, and these are the richest men in Leeds.
No. The girls do it voluntarily for my dues. They don't get paid to do it.
Then we're comparing apples with pears. Your dues don't sound anything like this, unless you're subtly telling me that women regularly get molested at your parties and then come back for more the following year, which you're clearly not. So what went on? Here you go. Get your knickers off, finish this drink, and start dancing on that table now.
But you don't know that is what happened on the gents' evenings. What? Somebody said that to a girl,
yes.
and she didn't complain on the night. More fool her.
Well, but then you're making her responsible, Francine.
Well, she has to.
She's frightened. She's at the Dorchester. She's surrounded by rich and powerful men. She's signed a 5-page document promising not to do this and not to complain. This is where I think we're looking at the same telescope from different ends. I could never hear a tale of a woman being badly treated by a man and think, I'm going to say something negative about the woman, and I'm a bloke.
No, I think what's happened here is, had this molestation happened in the park, right? Quite right, do whatever you need to do. It happened on a charity evening when the girls know the guys are going to be sat there having drinks, laughing, joking.
Again, sorry. This is what we have to change. That blithe acceptance that you just articulated that, it's going to happen, they should... No!
Well, you know what will happen then? Then what will happen in the future is men will be so frightened to go to charity evenings that charities will suffer and not get the funds.
What will they be frightened of?
They'll be frightened of being accused of something that never happened or did happen and should have been dealt with on the spot.
How do you extrapolate from a story of being molested and abused that men who have never molested and abused women have got something to fear? How do you even do that, Francine?
Because
Do you hear yourself doing it? Do you hear yourself? The line gets drawn, Francine, between men who have done it and men who have not.
And the men that have not, right, will be nervous about going to charity evenings in the future.
Right, well, I am a man who has not, and I can tell you categorically that you're wrong.
Okay, fine.
I will never be nervous of going to a party and being wrongly accused of sticking my hand up the waitress's skirt, because I know, Francine, that I would never stick my hand up the waitress's skirt. And what you do, and I know you don't intend to do this, and you don't realise that you're doing it, you're telling men it's okay.
No, well, I certainly wouldn't do that. And as I say, I
just did.
Understand why. No, I can't understand why.
If we start coming down like a ton of bricks on the men who do stick their hands up girls' skirts, then men who don't stick their hands up girls' skirts are going to worry about being accused of sticking their hands up girls' skirts. Wake up to yourself, Francine.
My point. You just confirmed my point.
No, I just repeated your point back to you, so in the hope that you'd realise how vile it was, but you clearly don't.
Well, believe me, having run a charity for so long and done so much hard work, without the girls' help, it would not have happened. And I think if any of my girls would have been in that situation on any evening that we did, I would have come down like a ton of bricks on those.
Well, hang on, you can't come down like a ton of bricks on them, because then next year all the men that have never molested a woman in their life would be worried, under your logic, that they'd be accused of sticking their hands up the waitress's skirts.
No, because I would have not made it so public. I would have not got Mr. Corbyn to get involved. I would not...
Just a little word in their ear then, that's all right. You can say, that's fine.
No, James. I'm not a little girl. I'm not a girl that speaks to people in their ears. He would have been taken to one side by security and asked to leave, and he would have been told why, and also would have been banned from any future charity dues that we would have done.
But that would mean that next year men will be worried that they're going to be accused when they haven't done anything wrong.
No, because we wouldn't have made it public like this.
Oh, OK, so you'd behave honourably, but you'd do it in secret.
I think, there's always two sides to every story, and I think to make it
the wrong
so
side
public,
and the right side.
Yeah, to make it so public, James, I just think,
Well, that wasn't Corbyn's choice, was it? The Financial Times have made this public. He's responded to the presence of one politician. We're actually on the same side of this argument. I don't think he should have been sacked either. But some of your reasons for arriving in what I consider to be the right place, you sound like a lovely lady, but some of the things you've said are quite repellent.
Well, I'm sorry you feel like that. As I say, the dinners that we do are well controlled, and if any of my girls had any issues whatsoever, they would have been dealt with there and then.
Yeah, and that's great, but you can't then say, if you come down on these men too hard, then you might put off men who'd never dream of behaving in that way from coming to charity events in the future, which I suspect we can both agree you probably wouldn't say again. It's 11:13. Phil's in Hereford. Phil, what's going on?
Hi, James. Great to talk to you again. Spoke to you last week. I personally think that they both Jeremy Corbyn and Lord Mendelsohn have come up with the idea between them that, that he's to stand down to set an example.
And to leave Nadeem Zahawi hanging out to dry as well.
Yeah. Which at the end of the day, look, the whole event shouldn't have happened. Anybody that was going there, whether they're going to the before party or the after party, I'm a father. I've got a 7-year-old. If you've got daughters, if you respect your wife, you don't go to parties
I think that, but that's a sweeping statement that you make about everybody who went not respecting their wives. I'm very close to that position, but it is perhaps a little bit scorched earth. I've ended up in scenarios that I've found uncomfortable, and I probably can't think of anywhere where I've stayed under sort of protest, knowing that when I tell my wife when I get home where I've been, she'll be just as disgusted as I was. I haven't ended up in those situations, but I'm not po-faced enough to pretend it would be impossible. Phil, thank you. Last word on this to Tim, who's in Marlow. Tim, what's it going to be?
Yeah, should have been sacked. Absolutely right.
Really?
Corbynite. Yes, absolutely. Because part of his contract, if he turned up with the letters MP after his name, he was there in an official capacity, or anything like that. Where you are representing a company. If you are there under the banner of that company, then you are representing the beliefs that that company upholds, and therefore, if you are in a situation that brings the company into disrepute, that is an act of gross misconduct, and he should have been fired, and it's quite right he should have been fired, and Theresa May should have done exactly the same thing with her MP as well.
So everyone who attended has brought their own company into disrepute?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it was the first time. It's not like they didn't go on, without expectations. They did go. This had a reputation.
You can't prove that, Tim. You can't prove that. For me, there should be, for me at least, there should be an intrinsic relationship between punishment and proof.
Right, well, in which case, did he leave immediately? Did he leave as soon as he thought things were going badly? If he thought this is not the environment...
You know how these rooms work. There'd be 100 tables in the room. They might have been going on...
I know. Yeah, there may be 100 tables, but there were 150 relatively sexily, scantily clad women walking round. I think the tone of the whole event would have been pretty apparent from day one. From the very first...
And it's also worth remembering that the Financial Times wouldn't have undertaken the investigation unless they were pretty clear what they were going to find. So you could argue if the Financial Times knew what they were going to find, then the guests should have known what they were going to find. I've lost this one then. I still don't think they should have sacked him, but I've been kebabbed, Tim, this morning.
Can I just say one tiny little thing?
Quickly.
Is it like everything else? If you were in a sense of danger, if you were in a situation you weren't familiar with and thought this is not going to reflect good if it gets out, you should have left immediately. You should have got yourself out of that situation. They didn't, and that's what got them sacked.
Well, there we go. We end with a man putting forward the case for the dismissal of Lord Mendelsohn following fast upon a woman, Francine in Leeds, making a strong case for him being retained. And... can I have one topic? Tim, is he gone? Can I have one topic where I don't have to announce at the end what my decision is? Yeah. Just a quick glance in the rear-view mirror. The announcement at the very beginning of that event at the Dorchester last week, of course, this is the most un-PC event of the year, and some of you are telling me that there was an instruction in the menu not to grope, no groping, and therefore you're suggesting that there is no excuse for being there and trying to retain a patina of integrity and credibility. I don't know. I enjoyed that conversation enormously. Thank you to everybody who contributed, especially Pamela Jane, who's just, I've noticed, sent me a text. This in response to me repeatedly stressing that it is Lord Mendelsohn who has been sacked by Jeremy Corbyn and not Peter Mandelson. But Pamela Jane has taken it upon herself to text me, "It's Mandelsohn, you idiot," which, I don't know, tickles me. Maybe you had to be there.